Welcome everyone to the winter webinar for the South Coast Conservation Program, all about butterflies in my backyard, the BIMBY project. My name is Tamsin Baker. I'm the coordinator of the South Coast Conservation Program. I just want to reminder that this webinar is being recorded and we will be putting it up on our YouTube channel later. We have that your cameras are off, and you're muted, of course. You're welcome to turn your cameras on if you want, but please stay muted until there's time for questions at the end. So yeah, I wanted to welcome you here today, and that I'm pleased to say that I'm joining you here today from the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Slibetooth, and Squamish First Nations here in Vancouver. So I know it's quite a mix of you that have signed up for this. So please, if you feel free in the chat, if you want to put your name, want to introduce yourself, put your name, if you want to put your affiliation and where you're from, please feel free to go right ahead. And then helping me out here today behind the scenes is Patricia Fantillo. I borrowed her to help me out. She's with the Fraser Valley Conservancy, who is part of our steering committee. So if you have any technical issues or anything, maybe you can shoot her a note. So thanks, Patricia, for that. And how it's going to work today, before we get started with the main show, I'm going to give a quick introduction about the South Coast Conservation Program for those of you that may not be familiar about us, and then we'll move along to our guest speaker today. So let's see if this works here. Next slide. Great. So the South Coast Conservation Program, we are a regional conservation partnership. We've been around since 2005. Our mission currently is to reverse the decline of species and ecosystems by facilitating and coordinating actions, do this through connections and collaborations with conservation partners. And conservation partners is pretty much anyone who's working on the land. So that includes all of you. So we consider you our conservation partners. I also want to acknowledge that, so the region that we cover is the South Coast, and that spans from the upper and lower Sunshine Coast, the Sea to Sky Corridor, Metro Vancouver, and the Fraser Valley. And this area where we all live and work, it's within the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples who steward this land today as well. And I just want to let you know that last year we created an updated strategic plan, a 5-year plan, which you can read on our website. But just to give you the highlights of what the main strategies that the South Coast Conservation Program focuses on. The first one being all about connections and collaboration. So encouraging connections and collaborations between a network of conservation partners. We want to do this to increase efficiencies and synergies in our very busy, there's a lot going on in our region. We want to try and make connections of all the different groups doing work in this region. And so doing an event like today is a bit of that as well. We're also all about knowledge sharing. We want to help disseminate the best available scientific and technical knowledge to our conservation partners to make the best possible land use decisions. And doing workshops like this is definitely part of that. And then finally, I want to mention our work in regards to stewardship. We work towards promoting responsible and sustainable land and water stewardship practices to increase effective coordinated stewardship activities. This is what we work on in regards to this is right now is our Plants at Risk program. One arm of that is that we do stewardship work in regards to the endangered phantom orchid, only found in the Fraser Valley, as well as doing stewardship work in regards to coastal sand ecosystems, particularly up on the Sunshine Coast. So that's just a quick snapshot of who we are. And then just before we wrap things up here with this, I just wanted to highlight to you all our updated website that we launched last year. And you can see this is a screenshot from one of the pages. You can see the different categories above. The one I want to highlight for you is our species and ecological communities pages that we have. You can see down here to the left, we have different tabs of different species and ecological community profiles, those at risk. And you can look, there's profiles in all these different species and communities, and it has a short description, some pictures, and links to very important resources. So including butterflies like this threatened dun skipper. So I encourage you to check that out, check out our resources. learn about our programs. And it's a way if you want to stay in touch, go to our contact page and you can find information on that as well. Now, that is a quick overview about the South Coast Conservation Program. In terms of where we're going next for events, every year we host a larger connections event. Last year we did it in Fort Langley with a mix of speakers and participants. We're hoping to do it again this fall, so stay tuned for that. And I just want to give a huge shout out to our funder, particularly in the last few years. Environment and Climate Change Canada have really stepped up to support us, and they're the reason we're able to do events like this today. So thank you to them. And just to say how for a bit of housekeeping for this event, so as I'm going to pass it off very soon to Michelle here, is that if you could keep your questions to the end, so you can put them in the chat as she's talking. There'll be definitely time after she's done for us to get some questions answered. So you know about that. And then when you do leave the webinar, a few quick questions will pop up, some survey questions. We'd love if you could take a moment or two to answer those as well. So thank you so much. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the main event here today. So our presentation regarding the Butterflies in My Backyard project, the BIMBY project. And I'm going to just stop sharing here for a second. There we go. Let Michelle get ready to share. So I'm here to introduce Michelle Tseng. Michelle is a professor of aquatic and insect ecology at the University of British Columbia. She's been working on the BIMBY project, I think, since it started pretty much. And yeah, for quite a while. It's been around since I think 2022. So her lab group, they study a variety of topics ranging from butterfly conservation, which we're going to find out about today, to responses of aquatic ecosystems to pollutants. If everyone can give a big welcome to Michelle. Thanks so much. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks, Tamsin, and thank you everyone for joining me today during your lunch hour. I actually see a bunch of people that I recognize, so thanks for coming. And especially there's a few people here who are my partners in crime on BIMBY, and so you can keep me in check. If I say anything wrong, just pop it into the chat and make sure that I have all my facts straight. I'm also joining you from the traditional unceded territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. I'm also in Vancouver. I'm hanging out in my basement with my dog who is roaming around somewhere, and so he will sometimes ask to be let out. So if you if you see him, I might need to just like let him out and come back. But I'm not leaving you, don't worry. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about butterflies in my backyard. Before I do that, just a quick introduction to me. I'm actually a farm kid from Southern Ontario, or as my neighbor calls it, Ontarable. I went to did a few degrees at the University of Toronto, moved to the US for my PhD, came back to UBC, came back to Canada, went to UBC for a postdoc. And then I actually worked in science publishing for about 10 years, and then before joining UBC as a faculty member in 2017. And as Tamsin said, my lab works on lots of different things, including aquatic ecology and insect ecology. And we use outdoor experiments, field work, and indoor lab experiments to try to predict invertebrate responses to climate and habitat change. And that includes responses to warming temperatures, changes in the landscape by, for example, introduced plants, or changes in the landscape due to urbanization. And more recently, we have been doing, as Tamsin said too, a lot of work on pollutants, both microplastics, and now we're spending a lot of time and money working on actually the pollutants that come off your tires. The friction between your car tire and the road produces very harmful toxins that get into our waterways. And the artificial turf fields that are made out of that recycled rubber produce the same type of toxins. So we're trying to quantify um, toxicity of those compounds in our freshwater systems. But I'm not going to talk about that today. Today I'm going to talk about BIMBY, Butterflies in My Backyard program, which is something run by the David Suzuki Foundation. And I thought I'd just give you a little bit of history. Um, and Steven gets a shout out here. Steven's in the crowd, so welcome, Steven. So my involvement with BIMBY actually started with Butterfly Way, and the David Suzuki Foundation, which I'll call DSF from now on, runs this incredible program called the Butterfly Way Project, where it's a public engagement program. They recruit people and their neighbors and friends to plant native plants to encourage butterflies in their neighborhoods. And over the many years that this program has been running, it's now created a highway of habitat, butterfly habitat across Canada. And to me, this is one of the most impressive public habitat creation programs in the world. So um, I have been a huge fan of this project for a long time. And in 2019, actually pre-COVID, I reached out to DSF and I was like, hey, I love your program. Would you be interested in collecting data? Um, and I think Stephen, who is like the OG Butterfly Way participant and has this amazing Butterfly Way uh, Butterfly Way lane in that he and his wife and neighbors created through in North Van. Stephen was also thinking, I didn't know Stephen at the time, but Stephen was also, I think, thinking along the same lines. And so he and I and Winnie, who was a DSF staff at the time, kind of, I don't remember who the original people were, but I think it might have been us created BIMBY. And so BIMBY is now this sort of offshoot and a standalone program run by the DSF. And I help with the science bit, but it's really a DSF program. They provide the staffing for communications and webinars and engagement. And then we have a volunteer committee with Stephen and me and Sue, who's also on this call. I see you in there. And we do training and guidance and engagement. We help with recruitment and we try to do some data analysis and write some reports. And then we have the most important people who are the BIMBY participants, and these are folks from across the country, ranges, depending on how you count, 300 to 800. These are the boots on the ground, like Sue, well, who's in this call, and they take butterfly photos and upload to iNaturalist. Um, so it's really, BIMBY is also a public engagement program, and we 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 teach participants to take photographs of butterflies, which is not easy, and um, and upload these observations to iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is our main data hub for this program. And I'll talk a little bit more about iNaturalist just in case you're not familiar with it. It is a publicly available, it's like a website and it houses biodiversity data. And um, I'll come back to this, to iNaturalist and the importance of iNaturalist for biodiversity research towards the end. So I'll circle back to that in a little bit. But what's unique about the BIMBY project too is that we've created some additional options for people to also add information about what the butterfly is doing. So for example, feeding or resting or puddling, which is like taking salts and nutrients from puddles on the ground. And more recently, we're asking people to take photos of the plant the butterfly is using as well. So that's just a quick overview, and I'm going to go into the different pieces in a little bit more detail. And so this is a map of the 2025 BIMBY program. And you can see that there are 35,000 butterfly observations uploaded to iNaturalist. And these are some of the most commonly uploaded observations. So with the small white being first, and then monarch, clouded sulfur, etc. And so BIMBY, somebody brought this up recently, and they were like, why would I join BIMBY versus just putting my stuff onto iNaturalist? And that's a really good question. And I think of it as like an iNaturalist project with perks. So anybody can start an iNaturalist project. Like you and I, like everyone here on this call, we could start our own iNaturalist project and we can say like, hey, everyone, upload your favorite photo of, I don't know, a robin or something like that. And so then we would have our own little project within iNaturalist on, you know, Tamsin's buddies and their robins. Um, but and just for fun, I actually typed this is the front page of iNaturalist, and you can see actually that the most my screen is a little bit fuzzy, sorry. The most observed organism in the world is actually the mallard duck for reasons I do not understand, followed by the honeybee, which I also don't understand. But it gives you some idea of like the type of data that and photos that people are uploading to iNaturalist. So what are these perks, for example? Like why would you join the BIMBY project? And as I said, anyone can start an iNat project. So what makes us different? And I think a lot of things. We provide a lot of training, we provide a lot of outreach and provide this unique community of sort of like-minded butterfly enthusiasts from across the country, um, connecting in various ways. And we cheer each other on as we photograph our butterflies and pop them into our project. Okay. A little bit more of a history. So BIMBY started, I think, and Stephen, please tell me if I'm wrong, in 2019, when at that time, Winnie was our staff contact at the DSF, and she was, Winnie was fantastic, and she has zero science background, but I used to love to say that she could sell water to a goldfish. Like she was just the public engagement pro. She knew the name. She was on a first name basis with every single participant. She knew if you had a new grandkid, she knew their name. If you fell and sprained your wrist, she knew that. She just had a way with people, and that's so important for these types of programs where you have these touch points and encouragement for these participants who may be totally brand new to something like this. And so since 2019, I did some math last night. We've contributed about 100,000 Canadian butterfly observations to iNaturalist, which is about 17% of all iNat butterfly observations. This is a huge number because if you look right now, there's about 600,000 butterfly observations from Canada on iNaturalist, and those 600,000 observations were put there by about 43,000 people. And so just the handful of us, well, the few hundred of us who are doing this work on BIMBY, for us to have contributed 19% of all iNat butterfly observations in Canada for these years is a really big achievement. And I'm so proud of the BIMBY participants for even if you just upload one observation, I think that's a great step. And BC in particular has been BIMBY has done provided amazing coverage of butterflies, and just in the last 3 years, BIMBY has contributed 66% of all iNat observations in BC, which is phenomenal. And these are some of the reports that we write. So at the end of the year, we write a report about, what did we find this year, and what are some of the things that we've learned, and what are some of the steps going forward. Okay, so digging a little bit more into like what exactly do we do and what is it? So we have, I would say, like different levels of complexity, and it's sort of equal parts engagement and science, although the engagement part to me is so important because as all of us here who are in the conservation world know, if you don't have people on board, if you don't have your neighbors on board, if you don't have the local community on board, you're not going to be able to roll out any sort of conservation program. And so the engagement is really important. And so for our novice participants who are just getting started, we do a lot of these questions that I've posted here. So why should you do this? How do you, and then some nuts and bolts. How do you create an iNaturalist account? How do you get the phone from your phone? How do you get the photo from your phone or from your camera to iNat? How do you take a good photo of a butterfly? Where do you go to find butterflies? Which is actually a really, really good question, especially if you're joining from, you know, I don't know, downtown Vancouver. Like, where would you go in downtown Vancouver to find a butterfly? And then, oh, there's a typo there. Sorry. How is iNaturalist data used for conservation? And we go through these things with our participants in various ways through like Zoom sessions or through emails and other types of engagement. We also have quite a few now experienced participants since we've been running for a while. And then for these really experienced participants, we give them extra challenges. So for example, if you take a photo of a butterfly that's also on a plant, we ask that you photograph the plant and upload that observation separately onto iNaturalist. And then Stephen actually has created a way for us to link those two butterfly and plant observations in a unique field. And then we ask to, if you can, like annotate with our unique DSF fields, like the behavior. So this is a great example of a swallowtail that's feeding on a milkweed. And so in iNat, someone would upload the photo as a swallowtail and maybe upload the same, if not a different photo of the same plant as a milkweed. And then they would link those two observations. And so then we have a series of linked observations of plants and the butterflies that were feeding on them. And I'll get back to why this is important in a second. For the super keen participants, we have extra challenges for our BC BIMBY participants, and these are transect walks. So a few participants have been documenting butterfly abundance and diversity along these transect routes. And so this is a photo of Corey Dixon, who is one of our most prolific transect butterfly data collectors. And then here we have a photo of Jennifer and Marty, who have been walking this transect in North Van, the power line transect for, I think, 4 years now. And so documenting all the butterflies they see along on that route. And this type of data is really valuable because it's controlled and standardized. So you're doing the same thing at the same pace year over year. So then you can start seeing, then you know if any changes that you're seeing are real and not just due to, for example, maybe you went 20 times in one year and 10 times in another year. It's not just due to differences in visitation from people observing. And transects are sort of the gold standard. So the European Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, they all use this sort of transect approach to monitoring butterflies. So we get what I call true abundance data. Whereas with iNaturalist, you sort of get the data that you get from iNaturalist aren't really abundance, as many of you probably know. They're observations, but they're tightly correlated to human behavior. And so I like to say that if you were an alien coming down onto Earth and you wanted to know where all the biodiversity hotspots were, and you only looked at iNaturalist, you would think that the major cities are all the biodiversity hotspots because that's where all the data are. When in fact, that's where all the data are because that's where all the people are who are taking those photos. And we all know that those are not biodiversity hotspots. And then the transect data are excellent, but we like to keep it easy for people to upload, but that means at the end of the day, it's a little bit hard for us to clean. So that's something that we're struggling with now is like, how do we keep and maintain good Transect data? And then finally, we also, with our BIMBY participants, recently some of them have had the opportunity to do active research with my lab group. And so Julie Sieg, who is pictured here, um, second from the left, is an undergraduate researcher in my lab. And in 2024, she conducted a resurvey of milkweed in the Okanagan and Similkameen valleys. The original survey was done in 2014 by the BC government. And so Julie resurveyed to see what the state of milkweed is. Is it are we losing milkweed? Are we gaining milkweed? And also, what are some of the other insects that are using milkweed for as a resource? And we were especially interested in milkweed because my lab too is very interested in monarch butterfly conservation, and milkweed monarchs in BC use only this species of milkweed to for caterpillar growth. And so we wrote a paper up and it's co-authored now with 5 BIMBY participants and it's currently in review. So that's pretty exciting. Hopefully this paper will come out in the next few months. Okay, just keeping an eye on time. What have we learned so far from BIMBY data? So we have, through BIMBY, we have kind of, I would consider it to be 3 types of data that we've been collecting. The bulk of the data are butterfly observations, so a photo of a butterfly uploaded to iNaturalist. A smaller sample are these butterfly plant associations that we are challenging our participants to take. So that's the actual link between the butterfly and which plant it's taking nectar from, most likely taking nectar. Sometimes it's just sitting on the flower. And then the smaller subset is the butterfly abundance along transects. And I'm not going to talk about the data from the transects today. I'll focus on the other 2. So from the overall data collected from BIMBY butterfly observations, we have a really nice coverage of endangered species in BC and in other provinces. And we can start to see, this is new, the sort of the spread of Canada's newest introduced butterfly is the European common blue. And through BIMBY, we've been able to sort of track the spread of this butterfly species. So, so Sue and actually don't know Pumakit's first name, and Catherine Poole, and others have been able to photograph these endangered species of butterflies in BC, which is great. We know they're still around. We get some idea of what plants they're nectaring on, and that's all really good information for creating policy or recovery plans for this species. And then this is the European common blue. It's only found right now, I think, in Toronto and Montreal, but spreading quickly. And even just through the BIMBY data, we can see the distribution of this tiny and quite pretty, actually, butterfly spreading. I have a lot of family in Toronto, and I go almost every summer, and so I would say in 2023 and 2024, I didn't really see them around. And then in 2025, they were everywhere. They were on every tiny little plant, on every lawn. I was shocked, actually, how many European common blues there were. And they're so small that you might actually miss them. They're one of the smaller butterflies out there. And BIMBY participants also helped highlight that last year, 0 monarchs were seen in British Columbia. And this is, we don't quite know what to do with this information yet. We don't know if this is a blip. Monarchs, we do know that monarchs have been seen in British Columbia for thousands of years, and there are Indigenous stories about monarchs in BC. So we know that they've been around for a while. We don't know if 2025 was an anomaly. We do know that the overwintering populations in California, both last year and this year, are at historic lows. And we also know that when those overwintering populations are really low, there's a lower chance that the northern migration will reach British Columbia. So hopefully, this is not the beginning of the end. And my group will be actively looking in 2026 for monarchs in BC. And we have good data on this because we do have a network of people now through BIMBY in BC who I can call and I can be like, hey, all of you, has anybody seen a monarch? And when everybody comes back to you and says no, I mean that's real data. Okay, a couple of things about the butterfly feeding behavior. I'll walk through. This is a bit of a funny looking figure, so I'll walk you through it. Um, what I've plotted is the total number of butterfly observations on the x-axis, and then the number of unique plants visited on the y-axis. And then 2024 is in purple and 2025 is in blue. And the first thing you see that there is like this positive relationship between the total number of butterfly observations and the number of unique plants, which is important to know because it means that the more observations we have of a butterfly in our project in BIMBY, then the more we're probably going to see them nectaring on like more plants. And that's in ecology, we call that like a sampling bias. And that's just like, it's not that, for example, all of the butterflies on this side of the graph are feeding on more plants per se. It's just that we just have more data for them. But what we can show with these graphs are, I've highlighted some of these dots. So this is the cabbage white, this dot up here. And this dot is way above the average line. And that cabbage white dot tells me that the cabbage white, which is an introduced species, takes nectar from way, 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 way more species of plants than we would have predicted based on sort of the averages of what we know from other butterflies. Interestingly, the second highest is the Essex skipper, which is also an introduced butterfly, but it has been here for a while. And then these two down here, MM is the Mormon meadowlark and BH is Bear's hairstreak. Interestingly, so these two are endangered and they actually are very selective in the plants that they are taking nectar from. So their data is falling a lot lower than this sort of average line that I've plotted. And then ECB is the European common blue, which is this new one that I just talked about. And right now it's pretty average for the number of plants that it's taking nectar from. And the beauty of BIMBY too is that we can look at these patterns year over year, and we can see that the 2025 data are really, really similar to the 2024 data, which gives us confidence in these patterns. And then another beauty of BIMBY is, let's say, for example, that my lab wanted to do this study of like, hey, what are all the plants that these different butterflies are feeding on? Like here we have like thousands of observations that we've summarized into these graphs. If my lab were to try to do this on our own, it would take us years and years and years and years. And here we're able to sort of summarize these data points in a really short period of time because we have all these participants from across the country uploading photos. Okay, what else have we learned about butterfly plant interactions? And some of you have seen this before. So up here, these gray boxes, it's a little bit hard to, well, it's very hard to see. all these gray boxes are individual butterflies, and then these black and yellow boxes are the plants that they were seen feeding on. The yellow boxes are native plants, and then the black boxes are introduced plants. And I'll just highlight this big black box here. The fuzzy words underneath say Sersium arvens, which is Canada thistle. And this the thickness of this box tells me that there's a lot of different butterflies that are using Sersium arvens as a nectar source. And so all of these connections, all of these little lines connect to a butterfly. And so this is important because we don't typically think of Sersium arvens as a plant that we want to keep around. But we need to think a little bit about this because if we were to say go into an area and wholesale take out Sersium arvens, are we leaving nectar sources, other sources of nectar for these butterflies to feed on if we because we know that they are feeding on this plant. So let's think about, what are they going to feed on when we take this plant out? So this is also incredible data that BIMBY has opened our eyes to over the last few years. And then finally, we can drill down into individual species and look at, hey, the purplish copper or the woodland skipper, both very common butterflies in the southern BC. What do we see them nectaring on? And purplish copper, we see them nectaring on, again, Canada thistle. And woodland skipper, we see it nectaring on alfalfa too. So like Canada thistle and alfalfa, two, very widespread introduced species. So the blue is introduced plants, and then the yellow is a native plant. And you can see that both the purplish copper and the woodland skipper, they tend to nectar on both introduced and native plants. And that we see that over and over and over again. And so these data are important sort of for the reasons I alluded to earlier. It's just that native plants introduced plants aren't something that we tend to think that we need to keep around, especially if they're, harmful to livestock. But we do need to think about like what are the other nectar sources around if we do take these species out, sort of. And then finally, just from sticking on this vein of like, what have we learned from BIMBY data? Through BIMBY, we have these annotated photos of butterflies feeding on these nectar plants, and we can use these annotated photos as training data for what we call computer vision models. So this is hopefully a good use of AI. I know there's a lot of bad uses of AI, but hopefully this is a good one, where we've now trained a computer vision model to be able to sort through the hundreds of thousands of butterfly photos available on iNaturalist and pull out just the ones of butterflies feeding on a plant. So where we want to go with that is, let's say you have a species of interest, Bear's hair streak, monarch butterfly, for example, and you want to know, is nectar a limiting factor for them? Are they not doing well because they don't have the nectar plants that they really want? So this computer vision model can help you quickly collate that data from iNaturalist or any other photo-based database. So we're now testing we're testing the feeding part of the model works great. We have 97% accuracy on that. And the next step is to try to ID the plant, which is a lot more difficult because as you can see from these pictures, actually, you don't get all of the diagnostic features of the plant that you might need to ID it when we're looking at the butterfly plant picture together. But that's okay. I mean, the computer vision model actually does really well still when it only has a chunk of the plant. So that's what we're working on in my lab right now. Okay, what's next for BIMBY? We just met actually last week or the week before, and so I thought I'd share Engagement is still, I would say, the number one um, key factor. We love our BIMBY participants and we want to encourage them and want to support them in any way we can. And so focusing on outreach and prizes and fun challenges. The Transect data, we will still be running Transects in some way. I think maybe I will be reaching out to the individual Transect folks. I just saw Corey join. Hi, Corey. So Corey, I'll be reaching out to you individually to talk about Transect data. Um, we will continue. It's just we probably won't expand it, but we'll keep it going. And then also continuing to encourage people to photograph, do the two butterfly and plant associations across Canada. And then the last thing I wanted actually this to be more of a conversation with folks in the room. So hopefully you're still awake. um, the I wanted to transition to talking a little bit more about a formal or official, or I don't know what the word is, butterfly monitoring program in BC, and not just about butterflies, but just about BC biodiversity in general. And that's what this slide is about. So some of my colleagues at UBC have started something called the British Columbia Biodiversity Network. It's just in its infancy, and it's something that we're looking to grow and we're looking for partners. And so here are the goals right here. Networking across practitioners and sectors, combine data to make stronger inferences, and we to create reports and findings that can support management decisions, and then meaningful engagement with Indigenous communities. And those of you who work in conservation or any sort of monitoring or government, you know that we all are collecting the sort of similar types of data. We're all doing surveys, we're all collecting monitoring data, and we're all putting it somewhere out there. And some of us are reinventing the wheel every time we do this. And so there is a huge need for those of us who are doing this type of work to join forces and think about, what is a respectful way to share the data or to compile the data in a way that the users, everybody has access to it. And so my question for you is, if you do work in this space, and you can just type this in the chat, how do you obtain your biodiversity monitoring data if you collect it yourselves? Where do you store it and who has access to it? And I would love to hear from you. And if you want to know more about the BCBN, there's a little QR code right there, and you can, that should take you to a rudimentary website that has kind of the same information that is on here. And so but we would love to join forces with other people who are thinking about these questions about data as well. And I think that's all for me. Thank you so much for listening and joining me today. And thank you. If you are at all, we would love to have you join BIMBY. And you can join BIMBY either going to the DSF BIMBY website or directly through our iNaturalist page. I think the DSF website still has the information from last year, but I think it still works. I think it's the same links. And I'm very open to questions. If you have any questions about the presentation and you want to email me later, here's my email right here. And I would love to hear your questions and also your biodiversity data issues as well. So thanks so much. Now just stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was really interesting. Yeah, and also just to let you know, Stephen sent me a note that there is a Zoom webinar about the BIMBY project. Those of you who are interested and want to know more and want to participate, I put that in the chat. So I know I certainly got me really, really interested about this project. It's amazing what's been going on with this initiative. It's always interesting to hear what makes it for a successful citizen science project. And also, I've been always interested in all this data you've collected. Well, how do you actually use it? And so it's really interesting to see how you start to do that, make the connections with the butterflies and their plants, what's becoming invasive, what they're using, things like that. Just so much interesting information. Uh, if people want to put their questions in the chat, we can do that. Or you can, even if you want to raise your hand, you can look for that and you can unmute and ask. Um, but I guess one question I had was those. I was interested about the association of the butterflies and the plants, and about especially how the the Canada thistle, another sort of the invasive one, the ones that a lot of us fight to get rid of. That table that you have, or the sort of showing the associations, where can people find that information? Or has that been published in reports or?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, it's not published, and I would love to get it out. We just have tables and tables of so yeah, I can talk to our work team about how do we make that data accessible to folks. You're not the first person who has asked me about that, especially um, folks who are interested in the rare species of butterflies. They want to know what are the nectar, what are the key nectar plants. So we need to get that information out. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, I mean, I do work stewardship with landowners, and I get a lot of questions about we want to, have a pollinator garden and want, have, and so one thing I'm wondering, yeah, if in the future trying to, or maybe you have created some sort of guidance for those looking to create a garden that's butterfly friendly in different regions. Is that something you've done or are doing?
That the DSF has done that, and so there are resources on the DSF website. And Stephen and Sally, his wife, cr- created so the plant that the caterpillar uses to develop, so that the caterpillar eats, is called the host plant. And so Stephen and Sally have developed a database for caterpillar host plants. So that's equally as important as or if not more important than the database of the nectar plants. And so those two together are super important, and Stephen, you and I should talk about how do we share this information with people who are really interested in these pollinator gardens.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. But
Yeah.
to top up on Michelle, the David Suzuki Foundation has a load of information on, how to create a butterfly or pollinator friendly garden. So I would really encourage people to go there.
Sounds good. Excellent. Any questions? I see that there's a comment. Someone says there's a great plot in terms of, I think this is in regards to the data. There's a great platform called Wild Tracks that I think Connors with the Delta Farmland and Wildlife Trust, they've been using to publicly share their bat and other wildlife audio records. Don't know if Wild Tracks is something that you've heard of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm writing this down right now.
Well, I know these groups are starting, at least I know I do work with the Fraser Valley Conservancy, and we really started to embrace the use of iNaturalist to encourage people to send in their info. Otherwise, like with the South Coast Conservation Program, our focus is and continues to be species at risk. And so when we collect our species risk data, we make sure to share it with the BC Conservation Data Center. That's sort of still our go-to, or the provincial staff person who's involved in the recovery of those species at risk. So I try to make sure that when we collect this data, it sort of goes to the right people and the right places. And but sometimes it's not the easiest. And I think what I like about iNaturalist is that it's very user friendly. So that's, yeah. Let's see. I have a question here from Olga. Can you comment on maintenance requirements for the butterfly gardens and preventing invasive plant establishment?
So I'm a terrible gardener, Olga. I don't have a green thumb at all. My garden is full of moss. Um, I think there might be other people on this call who would have good information on that, like other than weeding. You research like add native nectar and larval host plants when we need. You do, yeah. So Colleen's got great comments on there.
Yes, it's a good response there from Colleen. Definitely, if you're going to remove the invasives, which now you're starting to find some are useful, make sure you plant the natives that are the ones that they use. And then we've got a question from Riley. It says, "Thanks, Michelle. Is there any major youth involvement with BIMBY?"
We, the first few years of BIMBY, we had a whole school program, and we had a yeah, and they had their own sort of BIMBY school bio blitz. The schools program is a little bit hard because schools end in June, and like the peak butterfly season is sort of July and August when schools aren't in session. But it would be, yeah, we would, thank you, Riley, for your question. It'd be great to get back into that youth engagement and figuring out how we can bring youth back into the program.
Speaking of invasives, where you mentioned that there's sort of a rise of this, is that the common blue? Um, what do the threats do invasive butterflies present to the native butterflies, or is that known, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, I think we only have three, unless I'm mistaken. So I think we have
Really?
the cabbage white, the Essex skipper, Essex slash European skipper, and then the European common blue. And please correct me if I'm wrong. Um, and it's like I don't have any information on whether any of these species have pushed out another species. We do have good data on bees and like the effect of introduced bee species into an area. And bees do compete for nectar and bees do compete for pollen. With butterflies, butterflies don't eat pollen. Well, actually, there is a butterfly that does eat pollen, but most butterflies don't eat pollen. And so and nectar is not an unlimited resource. So there could be some competition for nectar out there. But I think the jury's still out. My colleague Heather Karuba did publish a paper on the European common blue and sort of its spread through Ontario. But I don't remember them talking too much about competition. But those are great questions. And for me, it's I've been fascinated with the cabbage white because it's a really good example of how to be successful as a butterfly. If you want to land in a new habitat all around the planet, actually, you got to act like the cabbage white. Broad nectar breadth, broad host plant breadth. Um, and it seems to be flexible in the number of generations it has per year. And it's just an overall easygoing, happy-go-lucky butterfly that does well in very many different places. Yes.
Well, and maybe there are only three known non-native butterflies. Is that what you, and
I
maybe they're not
think
really
so.
invasive, they're just non-native, maybe, just not, they're not causing
That
the
is my
trouble.
understanding. I mean, we have a lot of sort of migratory butterflies that will come in
Mm.
and out in various years. And so um, the California tortoiseshell is a great one where in like in outbreak years, we get them all over Canada, but then in some years we don't see any. So that's fascinating to see as well.
We have a question here. Pamela asks, do we know how important or utilized cabbage white caterpillars are used by songbirds?
They're definitely edible, but they don't sequester too many of the plant toxins that we know about. So they are, I definitely see cabbage whites with like holes in their wings from birds trying to get at them. Um, but I've never seen a bird with a caterpillar sort of dangling out of its mouth. But if I had to put money on it, I would say the cabbage whites are a tasty treat for birds. And they probably will go after them.
Probably a safe bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just for when it comes to, collecting data across the province for the BIMBY project, are there areas in BC that you were looking for more people collecting data? Any gaps?
Yeah, Tamsin, you asked the greatest questions. Absolutely, we have gaps. Northern BC, uh, yeah, definitely northern BC, and then any of the smaller towns in BC too. We would love data from even if you don't get out of your town and you are in your town and you but your town is off the beaten path, it would be great to snap a photo of a butterfly and upload it to iNaturalist. Yeah.
Well, and I hope people that joined that learn. One thing I found running around trying to take pictures of butterflies, it's really hard. So hopefully you guys have tips on that. They move around so quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think one more question here, and then I think we'll wrap things up. I have a good question here from Megan saying, besides joining BIMBY and planting native plants, what else can one do to help our butterflies?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Megan, for your question. And thank you everyone for who's asked questions. Then there's the two number one killers of butterflies are pesticides and habitat destruction. So the native plants really help with the habitat destruction, and then it's the pesticides. So and I don't think it's like the everyday person like us, but it is like we do every year we get an influx of spongy moth, which is a moth whose caterpillar eats everything under the sun, and the, the province does widely spray for spongy moth, and unfortunately, that spray also kills the native lepidopterans, so moths and butterflies. And so that's actually a huge problem, but that's a balance. We have to balance not letting spongy moth establish in BC. That's an absolute certainty. But how do we do that in a way that doesn't isn't killing off all of our native butterflies? So I don't have an answer to that question. I mean, the government does really try very, very hard to have very localized spraying, but there's going to be non-target casualties from that as well. But if everyone here can sort of commit to not using pesticides in their own gardens, I think that's a great first step.
That's a very good tip. Excellent. Yes. Yes. Well, I think any more final questions before we wrap things up here? I don't see any more in the chat and no hands raised. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Michelle for such a wonderful presentation. Such an interesting project. I'm pretty psyched about it. I want to keep following it and see how it goes. Please feel free to share more info with me. I can share it through our network. And for those of you who are leaving, just make sure you fill out our quick survey. And also just thank you for spending your lunchtime with us, everyone. I know everyone's busy and really hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the future for other events. So thank you so much, everyone. Take care.